there was this one area, my first area. I'd been there for 4 or 5 months. And we'd have investigators and we had appointments and everything, but nothing super solid. Kept going through. And then there was like this miraculous chain of events that actually started about 3 years previously with some missionaries in London. There was this wonderful guy from Antigua. His name was Chibo. And he was fantastic. He would drive to work. He was like a contractor. And he would go to work and he would always pass this Mormon church. And he would see Plan of Salvation pamphlets inside. And he'd just be like, oh, that's nice. That's nice. Like, I'm sure that's a great church. He's a Seventh-day Adventist. Not really active, but his family was involved in the ministry of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And he's in the city center of London, which is like the best place to go to talk to people because there's so many people there. And some missionaries see him and they're like, hey, like, we need to talk to you. And they start talking to him and they tell him about the Book of Mormon. They're like, hey, there's this book. It explains more about like Christ. It's another testament of Christ. It gives a testimony of him and his relationship with the people in the Americas. And he was like, oh, that sounds very interesting. And they tell him a little bit about Joseph Smith, and he's like, wow, like, that sounds really cool. Like, I want to learn this stuff. He goes home. Things started going badly in his life. He put the book on the shelf. Never even opened it. And a few months later, he's in the city center again. Missionaries see him again. They give him a Book of Mormon, the same spiel. And he's like, okay, well, I already have your book. Like, I'll try reading it. And he reads a page of it. The introduction. Life goes on. He ends up getting a divorce and moving to Scotland, to a little town called Freakham. It's a great town. And he's in Dundee because he goes to the gym because he just had a back injury with his job. And the sisters are in the city center. And they go up to him. They're like, hey, we're out sharing a message about Jesus Christ. And he's like, I know who you are. And I know you're going to give me a Book of Mormon. Like, what is the big deal about the Book of Mormon? And those sisters, it was Sister Harris, Sister Lund, and Sister Hughes. And they were so good. They were like, hey, this is the big deal about the Book of Mormon. Like, you need to read it. Like, there's a reason you've gotten this book 3 times. There's a reason missionaries have talked to you 3 times. Like, it's a big deal. Will you read it? And he's like, yeah. But they didn't get his information from him. Nothing. That Sunday, he shows up at church. He doesn't have a car. He paid £40, which is the equivalent of about $60, for a taxi to get to the church that he thought was the closest. He got there. The missionaries see him and they're like, oh, hey, like, how are you? They see him from across the hall, but they're talking to all their other investigators and they didn't have a chance to go talk to him. The next week, the same thing happens. So now he's in this about 80 pounds, which is like $120. Kind of a big deal. And he's at church again. And he goes up to the missionaries. He's like, hey, I've been reading your book. Like, I need to learn about it. And it turns out that he is in our area. And so the sisters call us and they're like, hey, you need to go teach this guy. And so we go in and we're going over the restoration. And we're talking about specifically prophets and how in each dispensation there's going to be a prophet. And he's like, hey, so is there a prophet now? And we're like, yeah. There's a prophet that restored the church, Joseph Smith, but there is a prophet today because Joseph Smith isn't alive anymore. And his name's Thomas S. Monson. And he looks us dead in the eyes and he's like, can I meet this man? And I'm just like a little taken aback. I'm like, I'm sure you can. Like, he speaks twice a year to us at General Conference. And we explain a little bit about General Conference and he's like, I need to go and meet this man. And I'm just like, okay, like, this is our first lesson with this guy. There's no way in heaven's name that this is for real. And so I just go on and I don't really think too much of it. In our next lesson, we come back and he's like, so I got my tickets. And I'm like, you got your tickets to what? And And he's like, to General Conference. And I was like, wait, you'd have to talk to us to get those. Like, what tickets are you talking about? And he's like, my plane ticket. He had bought a plane ticket from Scotland to Salt Lake City for General Conference. And it was our second lesson with him. He ended up going. He ended up getting baptized. And he is just an incredible example of faith and following what you feel is right, regardless of the consequences. So that was Chibo.